At 5:38 in the afternoon on Saturday, May 2nd, 2026, a camera maintained by the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology captured something moving. Not slowly, not the gradual advance of a lava flow that gives people hours to pack and leave. Something faster than a car on a highway. Something made of fire and rock and superheated gas moving as a single mass down the Mi-isi Gully on the southwestern slope of Mayon volcano. The event involved a pyroclastic density current, locally known as USON, which surged down the volcano's slopes. The flow descended through the Mi-isi Gully on the volcano's south-southwestern sector. The watchers. The pyroclastic flow raced 4 kilometers down the southwestern slopes. An ash column punched 3,000 meters into the atmosphere. Wildfire Explorer, 4 kilometers. In minutes. An ash column taller than the cruising altitude of a small aircraft rising above a mountain that is already 2,362 meters high. And above the flowing mass, separating from it, rising into the sky like the exhaust plume of something terrible, was what volcanologists call a phoenix cloud, the ash plume that rises from a pyroclastic density current, named for what it looks like when something burning produces something that appears, from a distance, to be rising from the dead. It is the most beautiful thing produced by the most dangerous volcanic hazard on Earth. It is also how Mayon announces itself to the towns below, to the 124 barangays, to the rice fields buried in ash, to the 5,000 people who were in evacuation centers when the Phoenix cloud rose over the Baikal region at 5:38 on a Saturday afternoon, and to the one structure that has been watching Mayon produce this exact spectacle for 212 years, the bell tower of Cagsawa. Stay with me. Because the pyroclastic flow on May 2nd is the story everyone is covering. The Phoenix cloud photographs, the ashfall on roads in Camalig, the 102,000 people affected across Albay Province, the flights disrupted at Legazpi Airport. All of it real, all of it documented, all of it part of an eruption that has been building since January 6th, 2026. 4 months of lava effusion, rockfalls, sulfur dioxide emissions that set a 15-year record, and now a series of pyroclastic density currents that are still occurring as of this morning. But the story underneath the pyroclastic flows, the story that the Cagsawa bell tower tells every time Mayon erupts, the story that 69 eruptions in 410 years have been writing across the same communities, the same gullies, the same rice fields, is a story about the specific geometry of a perfect volcano and the specific vulnerability of the people who choose, generation after generation, to live inside it. There is a phrase that PHIVOLCS uses in its monitoring bulletins to describe what Mayon is right now, a phrase that distinguishes this eruption from the previous phases of activity and that defines the specific hazard window that 102,000 Albay residents are currently living inside. The phrase is open vent effusive eruption. We are going to explain exactly what that means, and why it means the pyroclastic flows are not finished. First, the volcano. Because Mayon is not a generic volcano and the coverage treats it like one. Mayon is the most active volcano in the Philippines. It is internationally recognized for its remarkably symmetrical cone shape, the near-perfect geometry of a stratovolcano that has built its cone through 69 recorded eruptions since 1616, each one depositing new material on the same slopes and the same drainage patterns. Wildfire Explorer. The symmetry is not coincidental. It is structural. Mayon's perfect cone is a product of its eruptive style. Regular eruptions from a central vent, depositing material evenly around the summit, building a shape that geologists call the ideal stratovolcano form. The same shape that textbooks use as the illustration when they explain what a volcano is. At any given moment, about 20 volcanoes on Earth are actively erupting. Often among them is Mayon. Historical records indicate Mayon has erupted 65 times in the past 5,000 years. Georgia Forestry Commission. The current eruption, the one that produced the May 2nd pyroclastic flow, began on January 6, 2026. That is 121 consecutive days of volcanic activity as of today. On January 6th, the alert level was increased to 3 on a 5-level scale after lava began flowing from the crater, and hot clouds of ash and debris called pyroclastic flows moved down one side of the mountain. Georgia Forestry Commission Level 3, on a scale that goes to 5. Level 3 means magma is at or near the crater, and activity could lead to a hazardous eruption. Not has led to, could lead to. The scale is probabilistic. It is the instrument that PHIVOLCS uses to communicate not what Mayon is doing, but what Mayon might do next, based on what it is doing now. Mayon has been at level 3 since January 6th, 121 days. 4 months of the volcano sitting at the threshold between increased tendency toward hazardous eruption and something worse. The jump from level 3 to level 4 can happen fast. During the 2018 eruption, it escalated within days. Wildfire Explorer within days. That is the operational window inside, which 102,000 people are currently making daily decisions about whether to stay or leave. Here's the mechanism that no coverage of this eruption has explained. An open vent effusive eruption, which is what Mayon is currently producing, means that lava is flowing continuously from the summit crater through an open conduit. The conduit is not plugged. The magma is not building explosive pressure beneath a sealed cap. It is moving, slowly, steadily, outward from the crater and down the gullies. As of May 5th, lava flow lengths remained at 3. 8 kilometers in the Mi-isi Gully on the east flank, 3. 2 kilometers in the Bonga Gully on the southeast flank, and Bway 1. 6 kilometers in the Mi-isi Gully on the south flank. CBS News 3 active lava flows on 3 separate flanks simultaneously. The pyroclastic density currents, the fast-moving deadly flows that the May 2nd event produced, are not explosively generated in this phase. They are collapse-generated. The advancing lava flow front reaches a steep section of the gully, becomes unstable, and fails. The collapse of the flow front releases the superheated interior of the lava and sends it racing downslope as a pyroclastic density current, faster, hotter, and more destructive than the flow it came from. The lava flow in the Mi-isi Gully collapsed, initiating a series of lava flow front collapse pyroclastic density currents that lasted from 0719 to 0726 on May 5th. The PDCs had estimated runout distances of 3,000 meters along the Mi-isi Gully. CBS News, 7 minutes, from 7:19 to 7:26 in the morning. In 7 minutes, a series of pyroclastic density currents traveled 3 kilometers down the gully that was already carrying the lava flow. And this is the operational implication that FIVOLC's chief Ma, Antonia Bornas, explained after the May 2nd event. Bornas said, "What happened was that the newest lava flow in Mi-isi Gully, being fed by lava effusion at the crater instead of growing, advancing, or lengthening, like what has been happening since January the 6th, collapsed. Axios, instead of growing. The lava flow that had been building for 4 months reversed its behavior at 5:38 p.m. on Saturday. Not because the eruption escalated, because the front of the flow reached a point of instability and failed. The collapse was not predicted. It was not preceded by a seismic signal that gave communities a warning window. The lava was there, then it collapsed, then the pyroclastic current was running. Here is the detail that should stop you cold. Sulfur dioxide emissions during the current eruption have averaged 2,166 tons per day, with a peak of 6,469 metric tons measured on February 4th, 2026, the highest SO2 emission level for one day in 15 years. That was later exceeded on March 6th, when SO2 emissions reached 7,633 metric tons. Georgia Forestry Commission, 7,633 metric tons of sulfur dioxide in a single day, on March 6th, 2026. For comparison, the entire industrial SO2 output of the Philippine economy in a typical month is a fraction of what Mayon produced in one March day. And unlike industrial emissions, which are concentrated at fixed points and dispersed through regulated stack heights, Mayon's SO2 is released at 2,162 meters altitude and distributed by wind across the entire Bicol region. Sulfur dioxide irritates the eyes, nose, and lungs, and in high concentrations, it can impair breathing. It can also lead to acid rain, which damages foliage and crops and impacts future growth. The ashfall also damaged vegetable farms and killed some cattle. Some agricultural loss has been reported, due to rice fields in the area being buried under ash. WGCU. Vegetable farms damaged, cattle killed, rice fields buried, acid rain falling on the most agriculturally productive region in Bicol. The families in the 12 evacuation centers are not only displaced from their homes, they are displaced from their livelihoods. The rice that was growing in the fields around Camalig and Guinobatan before January 6th is not waiting for them. The fields it was growing in are covered in ash that must be cleared before new planting can begin, in a region where smallholder rice farming is the primary economic activity of the majority of the population. At least 124 barangays across Albay Province have been affected by ashfall, lava flows, pyroclastic density currents, and volcanic earthquakes. Wildfire explore 124 barangays, not 87 villages. 124 individual communities, each one a distinct administrative unit with its own leadership, its own emergency infrastructure, its own geography relative to the gullies where Mayon's lava and pyroclastic flows are running. Some of those 124 are inside the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone. Some are outside it, but in the Ashfall corridor. Some are in valleys below gullies that carry lahar, volcanic mudflows that form when ashfall mixes with rain. All 124 are in the orbit of a volcano that has not stopped erupting since January 6th. Now, the bell tower. The Cagsawa ruins are Albay's most popular tourist site, the buried 1814 church that offers the iconic view of Mayon's perfect cone behind the bell tower. During Alert Level 3, the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone is strictly enforced and the site is inaccessible. Wildfire Explorer. The Kagsawa Church was built in the 17th century by Franciscan friars. It stood for nearly 200 years as the spiritual center of the Kagsawa community, a prosperous town in the agricultural lowlands below Mayon's southwestern slopes. On February 1, 1814, Mayon produced the most destructive eruption in its documented history. The 1814 eruption was a VEI-4 event that sent pyroclastic flows and lahars racing down the slopes. The Kagsawa Church, where hundreds had sought refuge, was completely buried. Only the bell tower remains visible today. The eruption killed roughly 200 people. Wildfire Explorer. Hundreds of people were inside the church when the pyroclastic flow reached it. They had made the rational decision that a stone church, thick walls, a solid roof, a structure built to last centuries, was a better place to shelter from falling ash and approaching fire than their wooden homes. They were wrong, not because the church wasn't strong, because pyroclastic flows are not stopped by stone walls. They are flows of superheated gas and volcanic debris that incinerate everything in their path. The church did not protect the people inside it. It became their tomb. Only the bell tower survived above the burial layer. It is still there. It is the most photographed object in Albay Province. The symbol on every tourism advertisement, the image on every postcard, the view that every Filipino tourist photographs with Mayon's perfect cone rising behind it. It is a monument to what happens when people shelter in a structure that cannot withstand what is coming. Right now, as the pyroclastic density currents continue along the Mi-isi Gully, nearly 5,000 people are sheltering in 12 evacuation centers in the Bicol region. The evacuation centers are concrete structures, sturdier than the wooden homes they fled. The PDCs designated evacuation zones are outside the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone. The Kagsawa Bell Tower is the reminder, visible from everywhere in Albay, of what the wrong decision looks like when Mayon is erupting. Here is what is not making headlines. The Mi-isi Gully, the southwestern drainage that has produced every significant pyroclastic density current in this eruption sequence, is the same drainage that produced the 1814 lahar that buried the Kagsawa Church. The same gully, 212 years apart, the same direction, the same communities in the path. The 6-kilometer permanent danger zone that PDCs enforces around Mayon is not a new designation. It is the product of decades of eruption analysis, the mapping of every historical pyroclastic flow runout, every lahar corridor, every ashfall distribution pattern across Mayon's 69 recorded eruptions. The 6-kilometer radius is the minimum distance at which PDCs has determined human safety is manageable during a level 3 or higher eruptive event. Authorities continue to enforce restrictions within the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone while closely monitoring ash plumes and ongoing volcanic activity. Thousands of residents have been evacuated from affected communities across Albay Province, with many families relocated to evacuation centers. Georgia Emergency Management. The enforcement is ongoing, and it is working. No deaths have been reported in the current eruption sequence. The evacuation system, the monitoring network, and the community preparedness that PDCs has built through decades of engagement with Albay's barangays is the reason that May 2nd's pyroclastic flow killed no one. But here is what is not being reported alongside that success: the families who refuse to leave. Every Mayon eruption produces the same phenomenon. Residents who know the danger, who have lived beside the volcano for generations, who have seen previous eruptions, and who choose to stay, to tend their animals, to protect their property from looters, to remain on land that their families have farmed for generations, land that is extraordinarily fertile precisely because volcanic ash has been enriching it for 5,000 years. The 1993 eruption killed 77 farmers who had ignored evacuation orders. Wildfire Explorer, 77 farmers. In a single eruption. Who knew the danger? Who had been told to leave? Who stayed because the land and the livelihood and the life they had built on Mayon's slopes were worth more to them, in the calculation they made, than the risk of staying. That calculation is not irrational. It is a permanent feature of every volcanic emergency around an active volcano in an agricultural community. The people who grow the food that feeds the cities are the people who live closest to the geological hazard that makes the soil rich enough to feed them. They have been making this trade-off for generations. Some of them will make it wrong again. The PDCs monitoring system is excellent. The evacuation infrastructure has improved significantly since 1993. And the people who stay, anyway, who are always there in every eruption, in every alert level escalation, are the ones whose names will appear if the Mi-isi Gully produces a runout longer than 4 kilometers. Here is the current state of the eruption as of this morning, confirmed from PDCs and the Smithsonian USGS Daily Activity Report. Lava effusion continues from the summit crater. As of May 5th, lava flow lengths are 3, 8 kilometers in the Basit Gully, 3, 2 kilometers in the Bonga Gully, and 1, 6 kilometers in the Mi-isi Gully. CBS News, 3 active lava flows, simultaneously, on 3 separate flanks, each one a potential source of collapse-generated pyroclastic density currents at any point when the flow front becomes unstable on a steep slope section. SO2 emissions on May 5th were measured at 1,829 tons per day, down significantly from the March 6th peak of 7,633 metric tons, but still elevated above normal background volcanic activity. Wildfire Explorer, at least 124 barangays across Albay Province have been affected by ashfall, lava flows, pyroclastic density currents, and volcanic earthquakes. Nearly 5,000 people are taking temporary shelter in 12 evacuation centers in the Bicol region. Georgia Emergency Management. The alert level remains at 3, increased tendency towards hazardous eruption, on the 5-level scale. Activity continues to include plumes from pyroclastic flows, seismically detected pyroclastic density currents, tremor, and volcanic seismicity. CBS News, alert level 3, since January 6th, 121 days. And here's the number that puts all of this in context. During the 2018 Mayon eruption, the most recent major event before the current sequence, Five Oaks escalated from level 3 to level 4 within days of initial escalation, ultimately evacuating approximately 80,000 residents before the eruption peaked and began declining. The current eruption has been at level 3 for 4 months. 4 months of sustained lava effusion, periodic pyroclastic density currents, record SO2 emissions, and 124 barangays under ashfall. The 2018 eruption lasted from January to March, 2 months at its peak activity phase before declining. The current eruption began in January 2026 and is still producing active pyroclastic density currents as of May 7th. That sustained duration is the detail that Five Oaks Chief Ma, Antonia Bornes, was noting when she explained the May 2nd event as a collapse of a lava flow that had been building for 4 months, not a sudden escalation. The accumulated product of 121 days of continuous output reaching a point of instability. The 3 active lava flows are all 121 days of accumulated output, all of them potential collapse points, all of them sources of the Phoenix clouds that the cameras are still capturing. Now pull back to the structural picture. The Philippines lies on the ring of fire and is home to more than 20 volcanoes. Mayon, nearly symmetrical and rising more than 8,000 feet above sea level, is one of the nation's top tourist attractions, a WGCU. One of the nation's top tourist attractions, a volcanic eruption site that people pay to visit, that generates significant economic activity for Legazpi City and the surrounding Albay municipalities. That is the reason the Cagsawa ruins exist as a heritage destination. The Bicol region, Mayon's home, is one of the most economically vulnerable regions of the Philippines. Agriculture is the primary economic activity. Mayon's volcanic soil is among the most fertile on Luzon Island. The same geological process that threatens 102,000 people with pyroclastic flows and ashfall is the same geological process that makes the land productive enough to sustain those 102,000 people in the first place. The ashfall damaged vegetable farms and killed some cattle. Some agricultural loss has been reported due to rice fields being buried under ash. WGCU. The ash that is damaging this season's crops is also the material that makes next season's soil more productive than farmland that does not sit below an active volcano. That is the permanent, inescapable bargain of living beside Mayon. The productivity and the hazard are the same geological process, expressed at different timescales. The 200 people who died in the 1814 eruption lived on soil that Mayon's previous 68 eruptions had enriched. The 77 farmers who died in the 1993 eruption lived on soil that previous eruptions had made among the most productive agricultural land in the Philippines. The 5,000 people in evacuation centers right now will return to that soil when this eruption declines. They will plant the next crop in the ash layer that this eruption deposited. Their children will grow up on a volcano and make the same calculation their parents made about whether the fertility is worth the risk. The answer, for 5,000 years of continuous human habitation around Mayon, has been yes. So ask yourself 3 questions. Five Oaks, Chief Ma. Antonia Bornes confirmed there has been no significant change in Mayon's overall monitoring parameters since the May 2nd pyroclastic density current. The lava flow that collapsed was being fed by lava effusion at the crater, and instead of growing, advancing, or lengthening, like what has been happening since January 6th, collapsed, initiating the pyroclastic flow. The collapse was not preceded by an escalation in monitoring parameters. It was not forecast by a change in seismicity, SO2 emissions, or ground deformation. The lava flow front became unstable at 5:38 p.m. on May 2nd and failed. The pyroclastic current was running before any community had time to respond to a new warning. With 3 active lava flows on Basud, Bonga, and Mi-isi Gullies, each one a potential collapse point at any moment of front instability. What is the specific early warning protocol for collapse-generated pyroclastic density currents that originate from lava flow fronts rather than from explosive summit activity? And how many seconds of warning does that protocol provide to the communities living in the 4 to 6 kilometer runout zone? Axios. The 1993 Mayon eruption killed 77 farmers who had ignored evacuation orders. The current eruption has produced sustained lava effusion for 121 days, generated pyroclastic density currents on May 2nd and May 5th, maintained alert level 3 since January 6th, and affected 124 barangays. The evacuation compliance rate has not been publicly reported in percentage terms for the current eruption, but the 5,000 people in 12 evacuation centers represents a fraction of the 102,000 people Fivolks says are affected across Albay Province. If 102,000 people are affected and 5,000 are in evacuation centers, where are the other 97,000? And what is the specific enforcement mechanism that distinguishes a mandatory evacuation order from an advisory that Albay's farming families have learned to calibrate against their assessment of the actual risk on a given day? Wildfire Explorer. And if the Mi-isi Gully, the drainage that produced the May 2nd and May 5th pyroclastic density currents, is the same drainage that produced the 1814 lahar that buried the Kagsawa church and killed 1,200 people, and the Kagsawa bell tower has been visible from every farm in Albay Province for 212 years as the most specific possible warning about what happens when this gully runs. And 77 people still died in 1993, and the current eruption has been active for 121 days with lava flows on 3 separate flanks, and pyroclastic density currents confirmed on 2 consecutive days in the same week. What is the specific difference between the community preparedness infrastructure in Albay today and the infrastructure that failed in 1814 and 1993? And is that difference sufficient for the level 4 scenario that Fivolks says can escalate within days from where the volcano currently sits? Right now, as you read this, 3 lava flows are advancing down the flanks of Mayon volcano. Basud Gully, 3, 8 kilometers. Bonga Gully, 3, 2 kilometers. Mi-isi Gully, 1, 6 kilometers. Lava effusion continues from the summit crater. The alert level is 3, CBS News. The Mi-isi Gully, the one that produced the Phoenix Cloud on Saturday evening, the one that produced the 7-minute PDC sequence on Monday morning, has the shortest current lava flow, 1, 6 kilometers. But it is being fed by the same summit effusion that has been running for 121 days. It has collapsed twice in the last 5 days. It will collapse again when the flow front reaches the next steep section. Authorities continue to warn residents about possible lava flows, rockfalls, pyroclastic density currents, and sudden explosive activity. Georgia Emergency Management Sudden. The word Fivolks uses to describe the specific hazard profile of collapse-generated pyroclastic density currents. Not gradual, not forewarned. Sudden, because the collapse of a lava flow front is governed by the physics of material failure at a specific slope angle, not by a seismic signal that gives monitoring instruments time to alert communities. In an evacuation center in Camalig or Guinobatan tonight, a family is sleeping on a cot in a gymnasium that was built for sports, repurposed for disaster, equipped with the minimal supplies that the Department of Social Welfare and Development can provide from its Bicol regional stockpile. Their rice fields are under ash. Their carabao, the water buffalo that are the primary draft animals of Philippine rice farming, are either evacuated with them or still in the fields or already dead. They have been in this evacuation center since May 2nd. The eruption that put them here began January 6th. Mayon has erupted 69 times since 1616. Its most destructive eruption in 1814 killed roughly 1,200 people. The eruption buried the Kagsawa church, where hundreds had sought refuge. Only the bell tower remains visible today. Wildfire Explorer. The bell tower is 5 kilometers from the Mi-isi Gully, outside the current lava flow runout, still standing, still visible from everywhere in Albay Province. It has been watching Mayon erupt for 212 years. It watched the Phoenix Cloud rise at 5:38 p.m. on Saturday. It will watch the next one. At any given moment, about 20 volcanoes on Earth are actively erupting. Often among them is Mayon, Georgia Forestry Commission. Often. That word carries the weight of 69 eruptions in 410 years. A volcanic soil so rich it feeds a province. Of 1,200 people who sheltered in the wrong building. Of 77 farmers who calculated wrong in 1993. Of 5,000 people in evacuation centers right now making the right calculation, of 97,000 others who are still there, in the fields, below the 3 active lava flows, within the range of the next collapse, watching the same mountain the bell tower has been watching since 1814,